From Broadway Street, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Ecuador, Puerto Rico. I said it again. Look at that. Argentina, El Salvador, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Mexico. Don't stop, don't stop. Come on, let's go, let's go. Here we are transmitting to the rest of the world. Firm like a bear claw, and that applause is to receive the rest of the world. Asia, Africa, Australia, Europe. No. Somebody needs to applaud more than that. Look at the flags from all over the world. To those that are watching us from different parts of the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, according to whatever time zone you're in. Here, we've sung, we've worshiped, we've had a great time, and this is the part where we communicate with the rest of the world, so thank you for being there on such an extraordinary Sunday. And let me share with you quickly, not just those that are here, but also on the other side of the screen, that a week ago, or this week, our team of missionaries arrived at the island of Cuba. So we send a greeting to all the Cubans. This has never happened. This has never been done. We took tons and tons of food so that we never forget, so that we realize that they might earn $2 to $3 a month. A month! They live exclusively on exactly just the exact amount of what they need. We sent this through Panama. This is science fiction to all those living on that island. This is your seed. We gave away these bags. During the week, we'll show you videos of what it was like to give away all this food. It was a celebration for all of Cuba. They couldn't believe it. They have to wake up in the morning and resolve their days by figuring out what they're going to eat. They have to wait in line for a little bit of rice, for a little bit of beans. This, what we were able to do with the local church, has to do with your seed. It has to do with your generosity. Even though we don't have a video yet, we gave away more than 100 bicycles. And it's also a means of communication. This is like giving away a car here. It's not what we understand here. This isn't just a bicycle to use on Sunday afternoons. No, this is a means of transportation to move through the city. And this is also something that never ever happened on the island. I always say that we bless the Cuban government and we give thanks to them because they've seen that we have no other intentions. We're not looking to speak in favor or against them. What we want to do is help our Cuban brothers and sisters. And I wanted to show this, which has to do with what you did, with what you gave. It has to do with your seed. So I want to profoundly give you thanks for your generosity. Those that are here and on the other side of the screen as well. Very well. And for those that don't know, because there's always new people, there's always a new crowd. Many months ago, we were able to go to Cuba and purchase some land and build a sort of model neighborhood where we placed 6 homes with certain commodities that, like I've told you on other occasions, maybe those of us that live in this part of the world, especially the U.S., to us it might appear basic. Again, let me repeat, it's running water, electricity. We're also taking solar panels because these Cubans spend 13, 14, 15 hours without electricity. So we've brought solar panels to add to their homes, but also all their faucets, the bathrooms. These people never thought that they would have this in their lives. So we chose 6 families that were living in inhumane conditions, 6 families that range from 70 to 80 years old. These are their last years when you don't expect anything to happen in your life. Maybe at 30 or 40 there are people that have more hopes. But these elderly people were condemned, as I'm about to show you. This is very short, but I want to show you. These are the last homes of the 6 that we gave away. It's the final episode of We Are River in Cuba. Watch.
Mi nombre es Jorge Nápoles y mi edad es 72 años.
70.
72. 72, no 70.
Ella se acuerda mejor.
Yo me llamo Rosa Montero y tengo 72 años.
Gabriel Malledo,
¿Cuántos años tiene?
78. ¡Aleluya!
Mi nombre es Miriam Rojas Martel, 70 años, y llevo 6 años viuda, sola, viviendo sola aquí en esta casita. Aquí, mira, esta es la cocinita. Ya ves que tiene el techo malito porque cuando llueve se moja. El fogoncito de corriente, tengo este otro fogoncito, que cuando se le acaba el gas, me quedo nada más que con el de corriente, porque nada más dan el baloncito una vez al año. Este es mi cuartico.
¿Cuántos años tiene ese colchón, doña Miriam?
Ay, mira, eso debe de tener como 30 y pico de años, más o menos. Bueno, yo hablo el agua y no miro para abajo, porque si miro mucho me da mareo.
Y muéstreme dónde se bañan.
No, ya
baña
vamos,
ahí?
no tengo. Ahí mismo nos bañamos.
Ahí. Me quedo agua ahí y me baño.
Y se va echando agüita
Sí.
encima. Ahí mismo.
Ahí mismo. Yo cocino.
Y cocino,
Como quede, pues
no
bueno.
le ayudo.
El arroz. Ahí un poquito de pollo.
Y ahí duermen acompañaditos los dos.
¿Cómo que no?
Aquí a Corrucay.
A ver cómo lo agarra usted. Cuénteme, doña Rosa.
Aquí a Corrucay.
El televisor que tienen es
No,
lo
no.
básico.
Que lo trabaja, que nosotros
todo, que
más
no tenemos
nos entretenemos, que lo tenemos.
En nombre de Jesús. Ay. Mientras ir para allá y para acá y así. Gloria a Dios. Mira, esto está podrido. Todo aquí no hay nada, todo está podrido. ¿Ves? ¡Gloria a Dios! Eso es lo que me sirve esto.
¿Y así ve televisión usted?
Sí. El frío está podrido también. Mira. Aquí duermo yo.
Hace calor, ¿no?
Y con esto hace calor.
Ah, esa es la ducha.
Ese es para mañana.
Se para bañarse. ¿Usted es feliz, Gabriel?
Que si estoy feliz. Ay. Tengo una felicidad tremenda. Y el gozo y la alegría. Y la paz. Libertad y libre. ¿Ves? ¿Qué bueno es ese? Ay.
Esperando llegar para que me dé la sorpresa.
Ah, qué contenta y nerviosa.
Tengo curiosidad.
¿Uno más? Más larguito. Eso, ahí está.
Gloria.
Otro escalón. Eso. Perfecto. Pasa adelantito, cuidado ahí.
Ay, gracias, gracias Señor por todas esas maravillas tan lindas.
Gloria a Dios, aleluya. Santo Dios. ¡Santo!
Es que esta es la llave de su nueva casa.
¡Ay, yo lo sabía! ¡Yo lo sabía! Gracias, Señor.
Contentísima.
¿Quiere ir a ver su casa? ¿Sí?
Contenta y nerviosa.
Y esta es la llave de su nueva casa. Esa es su casa, Gabriel. Esta es la llave de su
¿Cuál es
casa.
la casa mía?
Esa que está al frente.
Esa, a ver. Wow. Aleluya.
Una más.
Ay, gloria a Dios. Santo Jesús. Ay, Dios. Gloria a Dios. Ay.
Ay, qué lindo. Hasta los ventiladores, todo. Ay, Dios mío.
¿Usted cómo está, doña Rosa?
Y hace que en el tiempo que me quede por vivir, voy a estar en una casa de lujo.
Se puede hasta dormir aquí. Gloria a Dios, qué lindo está esto, ¿eh? Mira eso.
No.
Ay, Dios mío, qué fogón más lindo. Y nunca en mi vida, hermano, he tenido yo esa nada de eso.
El fogón. El fogón, porque es así.
Mira eso. Para cocinar. Me van a enseñar. La cafeterita. Y esto por aquí. Así. Se pone ahora en el fogón. Gloria a Dios.
Es así. Aquí tienen que enseñarme la cosa porque yo nunca he tenido nada de esto, hermano. Qué cosa tan bella.
Ay, mi hijo. Gloria al Señor. ¡Oh! Dios mío. Lo que nunca se ve.
Ay, Dios mío, qué cosa más linda de... Ay, hermano, por Dios, Señor.
No, estoy encantada.
¡Te encanta!
Lavamanos, las toallas.
Gloria, mira qué bueno. Aleluya. A ver, por aquí. Gloria a Dios.
Es verdad que Dios lo que hace es maravilla. Dios es tan bello que no hay palabra, hermano, con que agradecerle todo lo que Él hace. La toalla y todo también. Ay, Dios mío.
Y esa es la cama.
Sí, señor.
Y Dios mío, qué linda cama. Oh,
Y ahí es para que guarde sus cosas.
gloria a Dios, gloria a Dios. ¿Qué voy a guardar si no tengo nada que guardar ahí? Gloria, mira ahí. ¿Cómo? Bien. Feliz. Felicidades de todo. La paz, ¿no? Está libre.
Ay, qué rico.
Gozosa y feliz de todos estos regalos tan lindos que Dios me ha hecho y de ustedes, que ha hecho el propósito de venir a darnos todo esto tan bello. Qué cosa tan preciosa.
Nunca estas personas, estas 6 familias, nunca en su vida podían lograr lo que se ha logrado. Tener unas casas nuevas, tener esas pertenencias adentro, nunca lo imaginaron.
¿Está cómoda?
¿Cómo?
¿La cama le gustó?
Ay, sí. Es una maravilla.
Es una casa bendecida y linda, como nunca en la vida pensaba haberla tenido.
Y gracias a Dios ahora que estoy en una casa feliz.
Eso es lo que me ha gustado, que tengo un techo de que ya no me mojo. Estoy viviendo como nunca en la vida he vivido ni pensaba vivir.
Yo no sé cómo se encienden los ventiladores esos, ni sé cómo se encienden las luces esas, pero vas a tener que llevar a una universidad para que me enseñe cómo es eso, porque...
Me tiré en la cama y me acosté boca abajo. Si hubiera un mosquito no me enteré, porque yo así me dormí, precisamente.
El que da al pobre presta a Jehová. Y el bien que ha hecho se lo volverá a pagar. Como dice Dante, esto es un río que corre. Y esto no lo para nadie. River, nadie te va a parar. River, vas a ser bendecido, vas a ser prosperado de una manera especial porque es la visión de Dios con ustedes y ustedes llegan como un río hasta donde están nosotros. Yo les mando un abrazo a todos River, le decimos Dios les bendiga y un hasta pronto.
That is your seed. That is what you have sown. That's what you have done. So that applause is for all of you, not just Cuba, but for all of you marvelous people. It's not that we gave them a home and gave them the furniture, but then let them figure it out after. No, these are our families. We're going to continue helping them until the last of their days. And of course, it's not that we're not resolving the whole entire problem in Cuba, but imagine what would happen if each one of us did just a little bit, if each citizen that could did just a bit. Because, of course, it's an investment. I'm not going to belittle it, but it's not a super investment that can't be done. But for these families, it is the whole difference, and the whole island is happy. It's not that anyone is envious or jealous, because they know that a wind of change has come, and it's not coming from politics. It's not coming from a change in government necessarily. No, it comes from solidarity, from love. Because when the offering is big, even the saints distrust it. And so the question is, it's inevitable. What do they want out of this? What do they want in exchange? No, nothing. We're going to sustain this. In my case, like the case of many of you, I don't have my parents on this world anymore. They passed away to eternity. And honoring our parents or our elders isn't just limited to our family or our bloodline, but also any elderly people that we can help. And so in this case, I adopted 6 elderly couples. I hope that, some of them end up together. They're noticing each other, right? Well, are we ready, people? Yes or no? Very well. Before we get into the great story I prepared for today, I need us to go back to the days when cell phones didn't exist. Even though some of you don't believe it, even though some millennials or centennials and Gen Z are looking at me with eyes of wonder, that era existed. In past times, there was a segment in history that will always be remembered as the days of the landline. Even though some look at me incredulously and say, nah, no way, really? Well, cell phones weren't always mobile. They didn't always fit in our pockets or bags or purses. They weren't wireless, much less smart. Phones were connected by wires and cables that were plugged into the wall, and at the same time, they had to connect to modems, and those landlines, at least where I came from, they weren't found in middle to low class homes. Phones could take 20 years to arrive at your home. You would order a phone and ask, when will you install it? And they would say, well, let's estimate for 20 years. If you know somebody that works here, maybe 15. People in Argentina can agree with me. We used to travel for hours on the buses and on the trains. We would spend entire days traveling or in a waiting room without any phones or apps to entertain ourselves with. You had to read, stare at the ceiling, or sleep. Those were the good old analog days. They couldn't track us. They couldn't locate us. Dad would leave home and God would leave. We would ask, where's Dad? And someone would say, who knows, not until he returns. Nobody could find us. Nowadays, women say, oh, look, here, my husband's over here. No, but back then, nobody knew where we were. And my small intro story happened on a cold winter day during 1980 in Buenos Aires. That same year, in 1980, just so that we can find ourselves in time and space, Ronaldinho was being born. Superman 2 was debuting in theaters. They were assassinating John Lennon. Jimmy Carter was the president here in the U.S. In Argentina, we were still suffering the last moments of a de facto military government. I was going through 7th grade. Back in those days, that was the last year of elementary school in a school in my small neighborhood. And due to the fact that there were no cell phones, much less internet, all communication from teachers, from all of our professors, to our parents, was through a simple communication folder lined with red. Sometimes the message was simple from the teacher. It was a simple reminder, whether it be a holiday or a conference, a parent-teacher conference. But in some cases, it was almost a death sentence that would be written in that folder. And the ironic thing is that the transporters, the couriers of these messages, were those that were being sentenced to death. Dear Mr. Gebel, Gebel, give me your folder of communication. No, give me your notebook. And then the teacher would write, Dear Mr. Gebel, your son did not do his homework this week, and he's been very distracted during class. The teacher, the snitch, the gossiper, the accuser, the denouncer. She would communicate to our parents through us. That was cruel. And the following day, I should return with that same red notebook, where under that note that she had written, my father would have to sign, accompanied with an apology saying, we're sorry, we'll make sure that this doesn't happen again. Back in my days, those words of, we're sorry, we'll make sure this won't happen again, didn't mean that they were going to take me to the psychologist or a therapist. But the fateful day arrived on which my reoccurring bad behavior, I think maybe in 7th grade I was going through a bad season, it made it so that the teacher wrote in my notebook saying, I need to urgently meet with one of Dante's parents next Monday here in my classroom. Obviously, I was the first one to read the letter. And as soon as I read it, a grandiose idea occurred to me. Since I had already made up a few times that they had operated on my mother's gallbladder, and since I had run out of excuses and gallbladders in my mother, I went home, imitated my father's handwriting. I wrote, we're very sorry, I work all day and my wife has very serious health problems because they have to remove her tonsils. Signed, Federico Gebel, Dante's father. And so I took that letter back. I insist there were no cell phones. It was impossible to corroborate the authenticity of that letter. Only the messengers that transported our own news had access to the truth. The teacher read the note. She said, well, I hope your mom feels better, but I'm going to call them in next week. Oh. The following week, I wrote, Dear Mr. So-and-so, the removal of my wife's tonsils went well, but they found a weird lump in her stomach. So, my wife will not leave the hospital this month, and probably not for the next 2 months. And it was signed, Dante's father. This time the teacher read the note, she looked at me, she read it again, looked at me again, and didn't say a single word. I felt that I had tricked her, that I had tricked this teacher, that I had won the game. In fact, I even shared my cunning with all my friends. I was very popular, at least for 2 days. I was very popular. These were the happiest days of my entire school career. They were asking me for autographs, for me to imitate other signatures, to write other fake notes for my classmates. I felt like a politician. But Friday of that same week, the Machiavellic and possessed teacher took on the task of appearing at my front door at home. And as soon as my father went out to receive her, she said, "Mr. Gebel, your last note left me very worried. So the school sent me here to know more about your wife's condition." And then immediately, my mother came out, alive and kicking. And what happened next? You don't want to know it. The gruesome nature of what happened that afternoon obligates me to not share too many details, especially to not scare you and to respect my parents' memories who are no longer here. The truth is that 40-something years later, I still use this story to illustrate the ridiculous nature of shortcuts, because that's what it was. It was a shortcut. I was a scammer, a small scammer, but a scammer nonetheless. And instead of facing the honorable road, which was uphill and longer, I took the easy road, the dishonest one, the wide road. All of us at one point or another. Because you're looking at me now as if to think, what kind of leader do we have? No. All of us, even as adults, sometimes choose the shortcut, the easy road. And instead of facing the inevitable, we take the matter into our own hands, and at one point or another, we mess it up. We ruin it all. Well, that's what the character did in our great story today. Because this self-referential introductory story was about me, but today's great story has to do with someone that did something similar. His name was Jacob, or Jacob for my friends. As I said to you a few days ago, or almost a few weeks ago, Jacob's story isn't easy to digest due to the fact that this man misbehaved very often. And on the other hand, his story can also be a sense of relief for us, because we also misbehave frequently. I think Jacob was, according to historians, was the first ancestor of the Argentinians worldwide. Because if what we're looking for is a movie hero, then Jacob isn't our guy. He's not our character. If anything, he was more of a political climber, a lobbyist that always got himself into problems, into scams, into fraud. But on the contrary, if we want to know how much God can bear a scoundrel, a sloppy fool, a rascal, I know none of you identify with that, but it's the truth. Here's our story. The protagonists in our story are Bedouins. The land that surrounds them is vast. It's isolated. It's the desert. It's the wilderness. Rebecca gave Isaac, her husband, a pair of twins, Jacob and Esau. Twins. And amongst these two twins, I don't think it ever happened in history, but it's noted in the story that there was tension from the first moment. Rebecca could literally feel in her uterus almost like it was a boxing ring within her. Genesis 25:22 says the babies jostled each other within her. It's not poetic license. No, the twins were fighting inside of her until she begged God to give her an explanation as to why there was a revolution in her stomach. And he said to her, "There are two nations in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." It seemed like a hieroglyph, almost like trivia. Because God was saying, yeah, there are two nations inside of your womb. And from that moment, they were divided from the womb. And the particularity would be that the older would serve the younger. And that was something very illogical back in those days in the Middle East. And I'll explain that in a few moments. The thing is that when she finally gives birth, the first one to be born was reddish. His whole body was covered in hair, Esau. Then immediately, I would assume that minutes later, his brother Jacob was born, clinging on to one of Esau's talons, one of his heels. And that was a premonition of how they would end up living. Jacob always trying to climb to a better position. Jacob said, "Don't let me go," and he grabbed onto his heel. The point is that both brothers were rivals, fierce rivals, and that's how they became rivals in their adulthood. I would assume that they fought a lot during their childhood, during their adolescence. Esau was reddish, hairy, uneducated. Doesn't mean that redheads are all like this, but just Esau. He was gross, rough, rude, simple. When he burped, he was capable of splitting the kitchen table in half. Esau was happy hunting wild boars or deer or hunting quails and ducks. That was Esau's basic world. And according to the Jewish tradition, the Jewish father, or he was the firstborn was the one to receive all the honors. But Rebekah preferred and loved Jacob. He was more metro than sexual. The woman knows. He was more studious than muscular. He was more of a homebody than being out and about. He was more about, let me watch Discovery Channel on Saturday nights instead of going to hunt with my brother. Jacob was mommy's spoiled little boy. Genesis 25:27 describes it in this way. Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. He didn't go hunt his food. He waited for it to be served. Isaac the father loved the brute boy, but Rebekah the mother loved Jacob the softer boy. They looked more like the Simpsons and the Ingalls, brothers that faced off from the uterus, parents who had their own preferences, their own favorites, Esau and his strength, and then Jacob and his little brain. Any therapist would have become a millionaire giving therapy to this absolutely dysfunctional family. But even then, these twins could have coexisted had it not been for the privilege of the firstborn rights, which was very popular in Israel amongst the Jews in the Middle East. The firstborn rights, which promised certain entitlements, a certain economy, prestige in the clan, double the privileges. That's what the older brother was entitled to. One day, the obtuse Esau comes back home after hunting. These two brothers were adults now. His stomach was empty, and from the front door, he could smell the pot of stew, a certain soup. Pozole stew, in other words. He smells the red stew that his brother Jacob was stirring in a pot on the fire. And so the aroma of the corn, the maize, the pork ribs, the chopped onions, the cheese, the ghost chilies. You see? I brought details. See, I don't come here to be stupid. No, I brought all the details. The romaine lettuce, filleted, and the sprinkle of lemon. Your mouths are watering. Some of you Mexicans are saying, "Oh, is the service almost over?" And with his guttural and caveman voice, he said, "Little brother, hey, give me a little spoon, yeah? Give me a little taste of whatever you're making there." When you preach, you can pretend that he's Argentinian. Give him whatever accent you want. And the brother that had grabbed his older brother's heel as a baby saw the opportunity and didn't let it pass. So Jacob said, "All right, how much is this bowl of soup worth to you?" And Esau said, "Nah, don't, come on now, whatever it is. I'm dying of hunger, give me some." He was like a gangster. "Come on, I'm dying of hunger." "So it's worth anything to you?" "Yeah, of course. I would even eat a cow right now." "Give me your price. Do you want my bow and arrow? Do you want my new knife?" "It's all yours for a bowl of that soup." All right. All right. Then I want your firstborn rights. My firstborn what? I want your firstborn rights. Esau looked at the stew. He weighed the options. And then, without even thinking, he sealed his destiny with these words. Look, little brother, I'm going to die one of these days. I'm out in the streets, in the wilderness, hunting. So what good is it for me to have that whatever it's called, the firstborn? And then Genesis narrates that Esau belittled the importance of his firstborn rights. He despised them. The entitlement of being the older brother was protected by the law. A father could not give these rights to any other sibling that was not the oldest. But the eldest brother could sell his rights, could give them away, and that's what he did. For Esau, his firstborn rights were intangible, invisible, almost spiritual. But that bowl of stew was right there in front of him. So he accepted, and they made the exchange. And Jacob said, you know what you're doing, brother, right? When father dies, I'm going to obtain double the inheritance. You know that, right? But meanwhile, Esau started eating his soup, and he said, yeah, double. Just give me some avocado and some cheese. All right. You understand that I'll be the first and not the second, right? Yeah, whatever you say. Do you have any tortillas to eat with this? Esau, it means that the promise that God said to Abraham and our grandparents will be for my family, not for yours. Yeah, stop talking. Boring. Come on, serve me the food once and for all. What was happening during that lunch is that Jacob was becoming the father of the 12 tribes. And from his lineage, years and years later, Jesus Christ would be born. But that's what corresponded to his brother until that moment when he sold it away. That's what we call extortion to a gross man that's hungry. Wives, jot this down. Extortion of a hungry brute. Men that are hungry don't think, they don't reason. The guy sold his inheritance for something so fleeting, so childish, like a bowl of food that would one day end up in the toilet, in the latrine. And you say, okay, well, if he sold his firstborn rights for an Argentinian barbecue, then maybe, right? But since Esau's brain was located somewhere in his stomach, that stupid act that he committed seemed fair to him. Who in their right mind would exchange their inheritance for a bowl of stew, for some soup? Well, someone led by the desire in the moment who doesn't consider the short-term and long-term consequences. A few days later, their old father Isaac was mainly blind. He calls Esau and says, "Son, I'm old. Esau, go out and prepare some food. Maybe a stew, maybe a soup. And then I will give you the blessing of your firstborn right." And this old man's wife, Jacob's mother, devises a way to scam Isaac. Rebecca says to Jacob, "I heard that your father told your brother to go out and hunt a boar and prepare a meal, and during that meal he will give him his firstborn right, his inheritance. Why don't we devise a plan? Why don't we come up with something before your brother returns?" Look at what a beautiful character his mother was, right? "And then you'll pretend to be your older brother." And Jacob says to her, "Mom, even though Dad has cataracts in his eyes, it doesn't mean that we should treat him as a fool. Dad is old, not stupid." But Rebecca said, "No, you trust in me. Your dad will swallow it. He swallowed worse things that I've told him." You can now tell that Esau's nature was hereditary. So Jacob and his mother cooked a boar. They got some goat skin. Jacob put it on his shoulders and his arms to simulate his brother Esau's hairy body, and he entered his father's tent. And Jacob, by his mother's request, imitated his brother's voice, because she said, hey, careful, you have to trick him with the voice as well. So he went in and said, Dad, Dad, I'm Esau. I've just arrived. And the old Isaac fell into the trap. And with a deep, rough voice, he blessed Jacob, thinking it was Esau. May all the people serve you, and may the nations bow before you. Be Lord of all your brothers, and may they all kneel before you. Cursed be those that curse you, and blessed are those that bless you. I bless you, son. And without knowing it, Isaac crowned the wrong son. A little while later, the older brother Esau arrives carrying a boar. Marching back singing, preparing food for his father. And he says, Dad, I prepared your favorite food. At that point, the dad was no longer hungry. The blessing was no longer available. And the father, shaking, said, I'm sorry. Your mother and your brother tricked me. I just blessed your brother. Now, with our Western mentality, I know what you're thinking. Oh, you can fix this easily. We'll grab Jacob by the neck. We'll drag him back into the tent and have the father retract the blessing and then bless the correct son. But it didn't work this way in the Middle East. The blessing had an incorporated binding element, and it was irrevocable. Jacob had already cashed in the check. And in a way, it's a symbol, even today, of the power of our words. There are occasions where you can't retract your statement. You might say, yeah, we live in a time where not even contracts are worth anything. But I'm talking about those moments of frustration where we tell a child that has disappointed us, or we adjectify them, or we disqualify them. And later, like all parents, we calm down, we reason, and we think, where's the rewind button so I can erase all that I did or said? Why did I allow myself to be led by emotions? If anything, I was worse when I was their age. How many times should we tell our parents that they've been good parents until those harmful words in one way or another, it affected us in the days to come for a reason? James gave advice to those of us that have a quicker jaw than mine, that we should be slow to speak. Not too long ago, somebody told me, when they interview you, the great difference will be that you take 10 seconds to respond before you give your answer. I asked, 10 seconds? And they said, yeah, the interviewer won't notice it, but it'll give you the opportunity to say something well thought out. It's to say, if they ask you, how are you doing in life? Where do you find yourself at this moment? I'm doing great. 10 seconds. These 10 seconds help us to not mess up. The thing is that from that point on, from what happened in that tent, from that moment on, the Bible says that Esau held a resentment for his brother and swore, as soon as my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. And he said it loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. Rebecca hears the threat, their mother, and she tells her preferred son to pack his bags and to move out. She says, your brother's going to kill you. And when your brother says he's going to kill you, it's not a metaphor. He's going to kill you. So Jacob accomplished what he wanted, but at what cost? His family was disintegrated. He had to flee for life. He betrayed his father's trust. He lied to get his inheritance, but he had to leave with the backpack, all because he took a shortcut, all because he couldn't wait. And the question is, what shortcuts do we take in life? Sometimes all we have to do is wait, because God and time are our allies. The thing is that God's time is different than ours, and that's what makes us nervous and anxious. So we make tricks. we take shortcuts. If it's not by imitating our father's signature in that red notebook, then we do it with our taxes or our Excel spreadsheet. We deceive people, maybe not with goat skins, but with lies. We polish apples. We exaggerate our doings. We put makeup on the truth, and we try to confuse the system. How many shortcuts have been justified with the best of intentions? But one wrong shortcut, even taken because of the right reasons, always ends up causing pain. Always. It's a labyrinth with a lot of hidden traps. So God doesn't need us to help him with our plans, with his plans. Rebecca didn't need to conspire. Jacob didn't need to deceive. All they should have done was wait on the Lord. God had said that the older brother would serve the younger brother, period. It would happen in God's time. It's always perfect. And to imitate our father's signature in our red notebook, sooner or later will get us into problems. Imitating and saying, this is what my father said. This is what God said. This is what I felt. Imitating and putting our father's fake words in our mouth will always get us into problems. Always. One day the teacher will show up at your front door. But every time we take a shortcut in the past, that changes our future world. Always. Psychologists would say it's a sort of turning point, a joint. To say it in simple terms, it's a clearing the waters. We've all lived the collateral damages of a poor decision. Jacob spent 20 years in exile, fleeing, running away from his brother. 20 years. That was the shadow of his fear, the stigma of his past. 20 years living in the shadow of fear. At any moment, I might find my brother around the corner on the other side of this mountain, and my life will end as I know it. 20 years living this way. 20 years in exile as a fugitive. And the majority of us live in the stigma of a broken family, an upset relative, a child that doesn't speak to us, a father that doesn't answer our calls, a brother that hates us. We don't say it because it causes pain, but in Jacob's case, he had deceived his father and his brother, and one day, after 2 decades, it's as if God got tired of seeing Jacob escape. And to a certain point, Jacob also grew tired of being a fugitive, because what good is it to have an inheritance that you stole if you can't enjoy it? So in Genesis 31:3, God says to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Don't worry. Oh, man, now he has to face, because one thing is to escape your past. But then, if God tells you to go and face that shadow of fear, it's terrifying. Encountering Esau was not only a spiritual need, but also an emotional need for him. To advance towards his future, he had to confront his past. If not, you can't build a future. Careful. Esau isn't the only one with a dead man in his closet. Moses also had blood on his hands. Abraham was a shameless liar. Elijah was a coward. Peter was a traitor. Paul was a killer. However, God gave all them another opportunity. He didn't allow their pasts to trap them. So God isn't discouraged by the ugly chapters or episodes in our saga. So Jacob decides that he's going to face his brother, and he directs himself to the south, what we now call Turkey, to find his brother. I don't know what he was thinking, but in the end he said, I think it happens to all of us when we grow tired of pretending. There's a moment where we say, I've come this far, period. Whatever needs to happen, let it happen. I'll face it. Authenticity gives you peace. It's not the same as a lack of privacy. Authenticity doesn't mean take a selfie on the toilet. No, that's a lack of privacy. Authenticity is, let me stop pretending. Let me be who I actually am. At the end of the day, I'd rather be hated for who I am than to be loved for who I'm not. And so one day, Esau, obeying God, also grows tired of pretending. And as his encounter with his brother was getting closer, to make a long story short, he sends a couple of messengers to scope out the situation. And when Jacob's messengers return, they say to him, Jacob, we went, and yes, your brother's also on his way to see you, and he's coming with 400 men. There, the little spoiled boy's knees began to tremble. Jacob, the old strategist, that old lone wolf, What did he do? He split his committee into two groups. All of his people, his camels, his cows. And he said, okay, you, the first half, you go first. If Esau attacks you, then the second half, the second camp, will have time to escape. Jacob wanted to avoid a bloodbath. And now, to soften his brother, he begins to send him gifts, one after another. Goats, sheep, rams, cows, bulls, mother-in-laws, anything that he had a surplus of. He sent 500 animals in groups of 6. As if to say, I come in peace. Jacob instructed the shepherds to tell Esau, your servant Jacob, comes after all of us, after all these gifts, Jacob will be here. A brave man. After all the gifts comes Jacob, your servant. The word used here in Hebrew was employed to recognize a state of inferiority, as if to say, yes, I'm an idiot, I'm an imbecile. I'm just a cockroach by your side, Esau. He sent all the gifts across the sea. He needed a night alone to breathe, because he knew that the next day he might die, because his brother swore he would kill him. And his brother wasn't one to reason. It wasn't about him calming down. No, he had a short fuse. When he was upset, he was upset. And that anger had fed that fire for 20 years. And then, as Jacob was alone, the next day he would have to go and face his brother. Something mysterious happens there. Something strange. Something very weird. It's the only occasion in which this will happen in the Bible. Something very mysterious. Someone that the Bible first describes as a man. It says a man. It was believed to be an angel, or a sort of angel, but a man begins to fight with Jacob in the middle of the night. That somebody grabs Jacob by the throat and tosses him to the ground. And Jacob jumps up and elbows him in the stomach. He elbows him until both attackers fall on their faces. The strange figure got on top of Jacob, pushing down his shoulders on the edge of the river. They were both covered in mud at this point. And while they were both fighting, the wind roared. Both were groaning. They were elbowing each other, scraping each other, scratching each other. They were like two wrestlers. The man tried to run, but Jacob grabs him and drags him back and continue battling. Both bodies were covered in mud. They were slippery, their skin moist with sweat. They were jumping like gazelles. It was a chaotic scene with a whole lot of testosterone and adrenaline. They were fighting, punching, dodging, blocking. It was like Tom Cruise fighting. A bloody brawl. Jacob had always taken his own his problems into his own hands. Jacob was intelligent, cunning. He had earned his living that way. He was insightful. He was an unscrupulous climber. But this time the rules had changed. He'd fought all night until Jacob saw the first ray of sunlight. And he realized that he had been fighting all night. I think they might have taken certain breaks for a few minutes. Time out. They drink some water and they continue fighting. And the Bible narrates that when this man realized that he could not defeat Jacob, he touched the joint in his hip and it dislocated Jacob's hip. Who was this strange man? Well, later on, Jacob would say, I saw God face to face, and my life has been preserved. This is in Genesis 32:30. God allowed Jacob to fight, making him think that he had the control all night. And then with one single touch, like someone that's playing with an amateur boxer, God dislocated his hip like this, leaving Jacob dragging his leg, limping, ready to face Esau. It's as if God said, no, Jacob, we're done. We're done. And Jacob said, no, come on. No, you've come this far, Jacob. He touched him with the strength, with the force that Jacob had never felt. He fell to the ground in pain, humiliated, an injury that gives very clear symbolism, because the hip is what supports our body more than any other joint or any other structure in our body. That's where the strongest muscles are found. However, that damage in his muscles is not something that could be fixed with a few days of rest. No, his vital organs were also affected, so it redefines his masculinity. The message with this dislocation was, you're not as strong, nor as intelligent, nor as cunning as you thought you were. Just trust in me, you fool. To not say big mouth, right? But in that moment is when Jacob realizes that he completely depends on God, and that's what's happened to us during the pandemic or any other point in life. When we spend a time in a hospital bed, or we're immobilized in the hospital, or we have to go through a cemetery, or we're rushed off to the hospital in an ambulance, everything can come crashing down in a matter of seconds. It's happened to all of us. Just a touch. Just a little touch. An extra palpitation, a little bit of stress, a hormonal shift, some salts mixing in our brain, and then we dive into a deep depression. You don't need a tragic accident or a misfortune. You don't need a catastrophe. Sometimes it's just a little touch. That's the moment where God places us face to face with ourselves, and we see what we don't like to see. Our vulnerability, sometimes a single touch. In this case, a touch on the hip places us on our knees. A direct punch, a jab, a little short jab, and we're left in a daze, with birds flying around us like the cartoons. You don't have to go to the basilica, the church, the synagogue to have these types of epiphanies or these divine encounters. However, in that very moment, God dispenses his grace, his forgiveness. Look at what happened to Jacob. When the guy's like this, tired of fighting, sweating, but with a dislocated hip, he asks him. The angel asks him, "What is your name?" And he says, "Jacob." On the page, there is no space between the question and the answer, but I think there was a long pause in reality. Got stuck in trying to answer, because Jacob means scammer, deceiver. That's the true meaning of his name. So when he asks him, "What's your name?" he says, "My name is Jacob." It wasn't an answer, but more of a confession. Jacob was admitting that he was a Jacob, a scammer, a deceiver, a liar, a trickster, a fraud. This is what I am. I'm a Jacob. And the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel." Because not only have you been a guy that has fought with men, today you have battled against God. Today you fought with God, and you've prevailed. You've survived. Surviving a battle with God is that. Having a second opportunity. And receiving a new name at any point is important, but receiving this one in particular has a special meaning. Because Israel means God battles, God fights. While Jacob means deceiver, trickster, Israel means God fights. So the old Jacob was fighting for himself. The old Jacob trusted in his own genius and his strategy and his quick mind, but the new Jacob, aka Israel, now exclusively depends on God. And from that day on, every time he presented himself to someone, he would say, "Nice to meet you, my name is God Fights." At any dinner, if somebody was looking for him, people would say, "Hey, God Fights, come on, ready, the food's ready." Oh wait, no, they were poor, so they would probably be eating pupusas. The day you guys are on this stage, you can give whatever example you want, right? His email address was godfights@israel.com. His hashtags were #GodFights. His old name reflected his old self, but his new name reflected his new self, his new life. And in the great encounter between Esau and Jacob, now Israel, that great day of the encounter, the hurt patriarch was exhausted. He was limping, very different to what he imagined the encounter would look like. He had just been dislocated. It's not that he had a post-op, he recovered, they put him in a room. No, he had just been hurt. was just showing off his new injury. And the brother, muscular and all, walks 13, 14 steps in front of his militia, his 400 men. He says, "Hey! Hey, what's up with you?" His beard is still red. Esau's arms are still thick. He has a bow and arrow hanging on his back. And Esau is the Doberman against Jacob, the wiener dog. And Genesis 33:3 relates, he himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. 1, 2, 3. Maybe he couldn't get up. Maybe he was just playing it off, but he bowed down 7 times. Jacob, in his craziness, before this injury, he could have run to hide, or he could have strategized another plan. But now, since Israel had no other option but to trust, he bowed down as if he was bound before a king in an old court. And suddenly Esau runs to his encounter. "Hey!" And he hugs him. He kissed him, embraced him, and they both cried. I think he squeezed Jacob so much that he lost his breath, and Jacob thought, this is how he's going to kill me. He's going to strangle me. But no, he was embracing him. They looked in each other's eyes for the first time after 20 years, and they cried of relief. They felt forgiveness. They felt the possibility of a new beginning, a new start. Esau cried because his brother returned home. Israel, ex-Jacob, cried because he could have faced his past all alone, only to realize that his past no longer had that power over him. It was just a shadow of fear. It was nothing more than that, just a shadow that he had enlarged. He had imagined it that way. But God had fulfilled his promise that he made to Jacob in Bethel. He said, I'll be with you. I will protect you wherever you go. I will bring you back to your land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. I will not leave you. It's marvelous, isn't it? So, God did it in a way that he usually does. This is modus operandi. He freed Jacob from his human power. He left him all alone, trusting in God. And then obviously, God had softened Esau's heart. God saw Jacob and his future, helping him face his future. And so don't retain anything. No shortcut from the past is too old, too bad, or too insignificant. You weren't made to carry that weight. You have to take that guilt from the past as a stone and give it to God. Give it to the Lord, and you'll know how he answers. He says, come to me, all those that are burdened and weary, and I will give you rest. You're no longer Jacob, you're Israel. And let us not boast of our false power. We don't have to fear Esau, because now your Esau, your past, is your brother again. Your enemy is your brother. The shadow of the past is your brother. You realize that it's not too great, not too important. Sometimes we make things too great, and we have such fear when we're going to be discovered, but then there's a relief. There's a relief in encountering that when you embrace it. Now, the last question that I have is, why did God have so much divine patience towards this Jacob? I mean, instead of leaving him a cripple, why didn't he just end his life? But on the other hand, I'm very grateful that God didn't do that, because I also play with the system. I have also battled with God. And many times, I'm not judging any of you, but many times I have felt that with my strength I could accomplish something, that my muscles would impress you. I'm talking about metaphorically. I don't have muscles, I already know this. But sometimes I can be flattering, informal, less honorable, so I can identify with Jacob a whole lot. I limp. You might not notice it too much, because I'm not debuting it, but I've gone through a recovery so you don't notice it. The limp in different aspects of my life, of my being. The thing is that God doesn't say that he'll love us if we behave. No, he loves us even when He's aware that we're misbehaving or will misbehave? What stops us from getting back up? What tangles our feet? What stops us from advancing? What burdens steal our peace? Because there's nothing better for a human being than, like my dad used to say with his neighborhood philosophy, with his very low academic preparation, he used to say, for me the most important thing is to walk with my head held high and go to bed in peace. And sometimes, even though we have God, we don't experience that. We live like Jacob, fighting through life. It's all through our own will, all through strategy, all through battling. I'm not saying that we can't think and that we have to hang up our brain and store it away. No, what I'm saying is that it's tiring when we think that our own battles and by consequence our own defeats disqualify us. 2 Corinthians 4:7, Paul says, but we had this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us, so that He can take the glory, so that He can take the credit. God gave us something valuable. He placed it in us, in broken people. Within us, God has given us the gift of Him inhabiting in this broken vessel. We have minds that wander. We have bodies that grow old. Your bodies are older than mine, of course. We have hearts that doubt, convictions that crumble. Our porcelain has fissures, cracks. And who wants to use a broken vase, a broken vessel with fissures? So then we pretend, we fake it, we become hypocrites. And for example, the church, which would be the most authentic place in the world, becomes the place where people pretend the most that they're perfect, that they sing to a perfect God, so that others can see how perfect we are. No! You have to recognize, yes, I'm a broken vessel. Life didn't treat me well from my childhood to my adolescence, or maybe my time as an adult, whatever it is. But who wants to use a broken vessel? God does. He does a whole lot with broken people. A broken up land gives crops. From broken stones, water bursts out. From broken heavens, rain comes down. Broken crayons still color. Broken cocoons allow creatures to fly. The vessels of alabaster break and give a fragrance, an aroma. And so here's the point. It's not the strength of the vessel that matters. It's the strength of the one that can use it. The one that says, I'm going to use your limp. I'm going to use all that's happened to you. I always say the same thing. We can't complain about where we were born, where we've come from. Many of us come from very poor neighborhoods, places that are lacking. Parents that like I shared with you, discipline wasn't, like a therapy or psychology. No, it was a belt or a stick or a staff on your back. And you might ask, why couldn't I have been born in Buckingham Palace? Well, then maybe we would be petulant. Maybe we wouldn't seek out God. Maybe we would try to win the world on our own because mom and dad gave us everything from the moment we were born. How many children are there like this, that believe that from toilet paper to internet and money, that they all grow on a tree? Mom, I don't have any new clothes. I want more. And the parents, in order for the children to not be traumatized and not live through the same lacking that we lived through, we go and we give them everything. And we're sending a weak generation into the world that believes that the world owes them an explanation and an apology. Now, those of us that limp, the way life beat us at one point, the day that God came into our encounter, I don't have the same way of walking anymore. I always say that I walk with my chest puffed out, but I don't have the same way of walking after a few incidents in my life that I don't have the time to share now. But I was changed. My way of seeing things. I stopped looking at humanity from above. I stopped feeling like I was the drain at the bottom of the ocean or the belly button of the world or the last Coca-Cola in the desert. Humility isn't something where you say, tomorrow I'll be humble. No, humility isn't an intentional decision. You either have it or you don't. I always say money doesn't change anyone. Money just shows what you are. The thing is that when you were poor, nobody cared about how you were. And when you have money, you can show yourself. And if you were miserable your whole life and selfish, or if that person was humble, humility has nothing to do with your bank account. It has nothing to do with money, yes or no? And there are a bunch of poor but proud people, and a bunch of rich and humble people, and vice versa as well. But one thing isn't inherent to the other. The truth is that sometimes that blow, that punch on the hip or somewhere in your heart makes us more vulnerable and makes us rethink life. It is believed that the old Japanese art of kintsugi, you might have heard of it, kintsugi. It started in the 15th century as a way to repair broken ceramics. You might have seen it in a home as fine china or in an office. Sometimes it's called the golden road because it's to repair the broken ceramic, not hiding the cracks, but highlighting them, highlighting the scar, like you do with tattoos these days. If you have a scar that can't be hidden, tattoo artists say, hey, we can make something up with this scar. Out of this scar, we can make a snake, a serpent. If the scar looks like a monster, then we can draw your wife's mother on there. I don't know, I'm just giving you examples. The artist uses a sort of lacquer to repair the fissures and then covers that repair with gold dust, and the result is beautiful, unimaginable. Lines zigzagging in gold throughout that vessel. And in that way, that piece tells a story of its past with each fissure, with each crack. And they're sold for fortunes. These are jars that were broken, in simple terms. But they repair them with gold, with platinum. And it might almost seem like it was intentional or on purpose. One day it was broken, but now it's been redeemed in a glorious way by the artist. And that's where we get to the end of Jacob's story. That clay vessel, that clay vase, that clay jar, that climber, social climber, that deceiver, in one way or another, he's kept together with the artist's glue. There's not much to see, but the guy made it. He accomplished it. In the end, Hebrews 11:21 says, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. That staff that he began to use after the dislocation, even though he was young. But that cane, that staff reminded him that he was no longer what he once was. And he died in his law, but this time, worshiping God. And let the same thing be said of us. We don't have to be perfect to be loved. We don't have to get good grades all the time. We simply have to believe in a God that remains with the unworthy, with those that don't do too much, until we return home. Because one day, we're all going to have to get off this train. We have the God of second opportunities. He never gives up on us. And though he has to leave us with a limp, leave us as cripples, he will not rest until we face our shadow of fear. That applause, ladies and gentlemen. If you believe that God has spoken, give a grand applause and say, Lord, you are marvelous. This applause has to be great to seal that we will begin again, that we are Israel. Yes or no? That grand applause, people, to the King. Yes or no? And of course, our name won't literally change unless some of you are artists and you give yourself a stage name, right? My name never changed. I was always Dante Miguel. But I don't know. Before my limp, before my encounter with God, Dante Miguel sounded different. When I was a boy, it sounded like bullying. It sounded more like belittling, lies, pretending. It sounded like a loser. Dante Gebel, my last name, sounded terrible as well. I would have given anything to change my identity, and one day it happened. One day in that encounter with God, I realized that I was vulnerable, that I needed him. I realized that humility wasn't something that I could decide. No, it came after a blow, and that blow came. If only it had hit my hip, because then I'd only have to explain a physical limp, which wouldn't be too serious. But that blow reached the depths of my pride, of my selfishness, my self-centeredness. And when I saw myself in such a great need and so vulnerable, I felt that from there on out I had to depend on God, and in one way or another, the meaning of my name changed when they began to say, "Oh, I've heard of Dante. The other day I heard Gebel and he made me feel better." So then I realized that my name wasn't related to what I used to feel. Being a loser, being a fraud, always living for survival. Now I realize that my name was related to helping, to blessing, and it helped me out. And instead of feeling proud, because those that know the truth about us, they don't allow us to feel proud. There is no clothes, no Botox, no prosthetics that could fake what we have in our soul. The fissures, the scars in our soul, there are no prosthetics for this. There is no Botox. There is no plastic surgery. There is no lifting for the marks in our soul. And something happens, changes within us. We know that from then on out, a countdown starts, and we have only 1 second opportunity, one great second opportunity to make a difference. May God bless you, may He keep you, and may the Lord make His face shine on you. Let us all pray together. Father, thank you for this morning. Those that are here or at home and are saying, I need to receive Christ in my heart, forgive my sins, write my name in the book of life. It's not religion. It has nothing to do with now belonging to a sect or a group, but saying, Lord, I want to give meaning to my life. Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you. I've transmitted what I believe you placed in my heart. I haven't added or omitted anything to what I consider you wanted to transmit to your children. Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you to those that are broken, those that now have tears. Can you feel it now? Those that are now saying, Lord, I need a touch from you. I need your touch. I need to get out ahead. I need to, but not that touch that left me limping, but that touch that heals me now. To face the shadows of the past. Those that are fleeing from something. Those that are fleeing from something you left behind in your country, in your neighborhood, in an old relationship, an old partner, children. I don't know. We all have a burden that we have to leave behind. And I'm not telling you to ignore it, but to face it. To say, Lord, I can't anymore. I've come this far. And if you have to fight with that angel, then fight. If we have to fight with that angel, let's fight. Lord, thank you. Because you bring us revelation. Thank you because you bless us. Thank you because you touch us. Thank you because you fill us. Lord, I bless your people, your children. I bless your entry, your exit when you wake up, when you go to bed. I bless November and December. May they be extraordinary months. May we finish it off extraordinarily so that we can start 2025 even better. I bless you in all areas. If you can lift your hand, say, I receive this blessing. And like that old Isaac, I say, I bless you in all things. May all the nations serve you. May you have blessings in the fields and in the city, in your entry and in your exit, in your cattle and in your crops, at the borders. May the Lord bless you in all your breaths, your deepest dreams. May He bless the fruit of your hands, the fruit of your labor. May your children be blessed, and the children of your children. May you have prosperity and winds in your favor. May the Lord bless you in all that you think of, dream, and envision, even the deepest things of your being, of yourself. I give you strength to continue. Don't give in. Don't surrender. Because even though you have to face the shadow of the past, in your limping, God will glorify Himself. I bless you. I allow and permit God to fill your heart, soul, mind, and spirit, in the body, in the soul, and in the spirit. Amen. Amen and amen. Be blessed to bless. That applause is for the King, people. Have a beautiful Sunday. Eat well. Rest. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Apareciste una noche de soledad, abandonado y perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti. Me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las dejaste allí en la cruz. Algo tan grande no lo puedo comprender. Oigo tu dulce voz diciéndome una y otra vez: oh, 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 oh. Eres bienvenido, eres amado una y otra vez. Oh, 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 oh. Bienvenido a River, eres amado. perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti. Y me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las